Failure was not an option. The shadowy organization known as Black Star had made that painfully clear. Recover the artifact or die trying. As Jeremy stepped aboard, his eyes flicked over the ship's interior, noting the positions of the 30 towering Illyrian crewmen. Each one stood over 7 feet tall, their scaly green hides glistening under the harsh lighting. 4 muscular arms sprouted from their torsos, tipped with razor-sharp claws. Energy weapons flared to life as the Illyrian crew mobilized to hunt down the intruders. Jeremy thumbed the detonator on his belt. The ship shuddered violently as the charges blew, ripping through vital systems. Engines sputtered and died. Life support flickered. Artificial gravity wavered. In the chaos, Jeremy and his team burst into action, ready to fight tooth and nail for their survival and their prize. Jeremy and his team charged through the ship's corridors, guns blazing. Illyrian crew members fell before their onslaught, green blood splattering the walls. The mercs moved with ruthless precision, taking down any resistance they encountered. As they neared the cargo hold, a massive figure stepped into their path. Captain Uko himself, wielding a plasma cannon nearly as large as a human. The Illyrian's yellow eyes burned with rage and hatred. "You dare attack my ship? Slaughter my crew?" Uko roared, his deep voice reverberating through the corridor. "I will end you, hairless apes." The plasma cannon hummed to life, spitting out a barrage of searing blue bolts. Jeremy and his team dove for cover behind bulkheads and supply crates as the superheated plasma ate through metal like acid. "Fuck, that thing will tear us apart," Mike shouted over the din of the cannon fire. Jeremy's mind raced, analyzing their options. A frontal assault would be suicide. But maybe... He keyed his comm. "Mike, John, flank the bastard from the sides. David and I will keep him busy. Steve, plant the rest of the explosives behind him. We'll catch him in a crossfire and blow him to hell." The team moved into position, ready to execute the plan. Mike and John crept along the walls, staying low to avoid detection. Jeremy and David leaned out from cover, spraying the captain with bullets to draw his attention. Uko swung the plasma cannon towards them, the barrel glowing white-hot. Just as he prepared to fire, Steve's trap detonated. The explosion ripped through the corridor, engulfing the Illyrian in flames and shrapnel. The plasma cannon clattered to the deck as Uko stumbled forward, his armor torn and blackened. Purple blood poured from a dozen wounds. Jeremy approached the fallen captain, shotgun at the ready. Jeremy fired point-blank, erasing Uko's head in a spray of bone and brain matter. "No, fuck you," he muttered. With the captain dead, the team rushed into the cargo hold. Amidst the crates and containers sat a small black sphere, no larger than a softball. It seemed to absorb the light around it, creating an aura of darkness. Jeremy reached out to grab the artifact, an electric tingle running up his arm as his fingers brushed the ebony surface. A pressure built behind his eyes, like something trying to burrow into his thoughts. Suddenly alarms blared and red lights flashed. A robotic voice echoed through the ship. "Warning, life support systems critical. Vessel will self-destruct in 10 minutes. "Shit, let's move," Jeremy barked. They sprinted for the escape pods, the artifact secure in a hardened case. Stray Illyrians popped out to block their path, but the mercs cut them down with controlled bursts of gunfire. With mere seconds to spare, they piled into a pod and slammed the launch button. The small craft ejected violently from the ship, just as a series of explosions ripped through the Zorkath's hull. The trading vessel ruptured like a rotten fruit, belching flames and debris into the void. As the pod tumbled away from the dying ship, Jeremy stared at the case containing the artifact. He couldn't shake the feeling that the sphere was more than a simple object. It felt aware, almost alive, like it had plans of its own. The pod's engines flared to life, stabilizing their spin and propelling them towards the distant glimmer of stars. Jeremy leaned back against the bulkhead, suddenly exhausted. They had the artifact. They had survived. But somehow, he knew this was only the beginning. As the escape pod tumbled through the void, its occupants took stock of their grim situation. Food, water, and oxygen were all in short supply. Worse still, they had no way to contact Blackstar or any other human faction for help. In the cramped confines of the pod, David let out a wet, rattling cough. Blood flecked his lips. The wound in his side, sustained during the firefight aboard the Illyrian ship, had turned a sickly shade of green. "He's not going to make it," John said quietly, his eyes meeting Jeremy's. "Infection's too far gone." Jeremy clenched his jaw, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. He knelt beside David, gripping the dying man's hand. "You did good, soldier. We couldn't have done it without you." David managed a weak smile. "Give 'em hell, boss," he whispered. Then his eyes went blank, his final breath escaping in a sigh. Jeremy bowed his head for a moment, then stood. "We can't keep him here, not enough room or air." Mike's face twisted in anger. "What, you just want to toss him out like trash?" "We don't have a choice," Jeremy snapped. "You think I want this, but we're in deep shit here and sentiment won't keep us alive." With heavy hearts, they sealed David's body in an airtight bag and ejected it into the cold embrace of space. As the pod drifted onward, the atmosphere inside grew increasingly tense. Tempers frayed as hunger and thirst took their toll. Mike paced like a caged animal, his fists clenching and unclenching. "This is your fault," he snarled at Jeremy. "You led us into this clusterfuck. We never should have trusted you." John stepped between them, hands raised. "Easy, Mike. We're all in this together. Fighting won't solve anything." Steve, meanwhile, had become fixated on the artifact. He spent hours staring at the black sphere, turning it over in his hands, muttering to himself. "It's trying to tell me something," he insisted. "I can almost hear it." Jeremy rubbed his temples, trying to stave off a headache. He knew they were reaching a breaking point. Supplies were dwindling, and the close quarters were driving them all to the edge. He had to keep them focused, united. But how? Suddenly the pod's sensors pinged. A ship had appeared on the scanners not far from their position. Jeremy's heart leapt. A rescue? He hailed the vessel on all frequencies, but received only static in response. He chewed his lip, weighing the risks. The ship was likely Illyrian, and after their attack on the Zorkath they wouldn't be welcomed with open arms. But what choice did they have? Stay in the pod and slowly suffocate, or take a chance on the unknown? "We're boarding that ship," he decided. "Arm yourselves and stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into." As the pod docked with the airlock, an uneasy feeling settled in Jeremy's gut. The ship was too quiet, too still. No signs of life. The airlock cycled open, revealing a scene of horror. Illyrian corpses littered the corridors, their bodies savaged and partially devoured. Green blood splattered the walls in abstract patterns. Jeremy swallowed hard, his grip tightening on his weapon. "We're not alone," he said grimly. "Stay close and check your corners. Shoot first. Ask questions later." As they crept deeper into the ship, strange sounds echoed through the halls. Guttural growls, insectoid clicking, and a laugh that sent shivers down Jeremy's spine. High-pitched, gleeful, and utterly inhuman. Jeremy and his team ventured deeper into the derelict Illyrian ship, weapons raised and senses on high alert. The eerie silence was broken only by the occasional skittering of unseen creatures in the shadows. "Check this out," John called, pointing to a computer terminal flickering with life. Jeremy moved to investigate, his eyes scanning the alien text scrolling across the screen. "It's a research log," he said, deciphering the Illyrian script. "They were studying something called the Vex, some kind of insectoid race." As he delved further into the logs, a disturbing picture began to emerge. The Illyrians had captured a Vex queen, hoping to harness her ability to manipulate organic matter. But their arrogance had been their downfall. The queen had escaped, unleashing her brood upon the ship. Suddenly, a burst of plasma fire erupted from a nearby doorway. Jeremy ducked into cover, his team following suit. Peeking around the corner, he saw a group of battered Illyrians engaged in a fierce firefight with a swarm of Vex drones. The insectoids were a nightmare made flesh. their chitinous exoskeletons glistening in the dim light. They moved with unnatural speed and agility, scuttling along walls and ceilings as they closed in on their prey. Jeremy's mind raced, weighing his options. The Illyrians were the enemy, but right now they were the lesser of two evils. He made a split-second decision. The Illyrians whirled, their weapons trained on Jeremy. One of them, a grizzled warrior with a scar running down his face, snarled in broken English. "Why should we trust you, human?" "Because we're your only chance of getting off this ship alive," Jeremy replied, his voice steady. "We help you kill these bugs, and you give us safe passage out of here. Deal?" The Illyrian leader, Zar, hesitated for a moment before lowering his weapon. "Deal," he growled, "but betray us, and I will gut you myself." Together, the unlikely allies fought their way through the ship, cutting down Vex drones with a hail of bullets and plasma. Jeremy took charge, his marine training kicking in as he directed the combined forces in a series of daring raids. But the Vex kept coming, an endless tide of chittering horrors. In one brutal skirmish, Mike found himself surrounded, his gun clicking empty. Jeremy watched in horror as his friend disappeared beneath a writhing mass of Vex, his screams echoing through the corridors. Every instinct urged Jeremy to go back to save his friend, but he knew it was too late. Mike was gone and they had to keep moving forward. The mission had to come first. As they neared the Queen's chamber, Jeremy felt the artifact in his pocket pulse with energy, growing warm against his skin. He couldn't explain it, but somehow he knew that the strange sphere was connected to the Vex, and perhaps to their ultimate fate. The door to the chamber loomed before them, a portal to an unknown future. Jeremy's grip tightened on his gun, his jaw set with grim determination. Whatever lay beyond, he would face it head-on, for his fallen comrades, for the mission, and for the fate of humanity itself. As Jeremy and his team approached the Queen's chamber, the air grew thick with an oppressive, malevolent presence. The artifact in Jeremy's pocket pulsed with an unsettling energy, as if sensing the impending confrontation. With weapons raised, they breached the door, only to be met with a sight that defied comprehension. The Vex Queen towered before them, a monstrous fusion of organic and mechanical components. Her exoskeleton gleamed with an oily sheen, while razor-sharp claws tipped each of her 6-segmented limbs. A crown of bioluminescent organs pulsated atop her elongated head, casting an eerie glow across the chamber. Surrounding the Queen was a legion of her most elite warriors, their chitinous bodies bristling with weaponry. They moved with a terrifying synchronicity, a hive mind united in their singular purpose. As the Queen's compound eyes fixed upon the intruders, she let loose a deafening screech that reverberated through the ship's corridors. The sound was a physical force, causing the humans and Illyrians alike to stumble backward, their hands instinctively clutching their ears. In that moment, the artifact in Jeremy's pocket flared to life, bathing him in an otherworldly light. A searing pain lanced through his skull as a flood of alien thoughts invaded his mind. He saw through the Queen's eyes, felt her seething hatred for all organic life. To her, the humans and Illyrians were little more than cattle, their sole purpose to feed her ever-growing brood. Jeremy gritted his teeth, fighting against the psychic onslaught. He realized that the artifact was the only thing shielding him from the Queen's complete domination. With a grunt of effort, he wrenched his thoughts back to the present, his grip tightening on his weapon. "John, Steve," he barked, "keep those bugs off our backs. Zar and I are going for the Queen." The Illyrian warrior nodded grimly, his own face set with determination. Together they charged forward, bullets and plasma bolts whizzing past their heads as they closed the distance to their target. The artifact burned against Jeremy's skin, its power surging through his veins like molten fire. He felt invincible, untouchable, as if the very fabric of reality bent to his will. Just as they neared the Queen, a blur of movement caught Jeremy's eye. One of the Vex warriors lunged forward, its razor-sharp appendages aimed directly at Zar's chest. Jeremy opened his mouth to shout a warning, but it was too late. The claw punched through Tsar's armor as if it were tissue paper, erupting from his back in a spray of viscous green blood. The Illyrian's eyes widened in shock, his mandibles clicking feebly as the life drained from his ruined body. With a casual flick, the Vex warrior tossed Tsar aside, his lifeless corpse crumpling to the floor. Rage and grief surged through Jeremy's heart, but he pushed the emotions aside. There would be time to mourn later. Now, he had a mission to complete. With a wordless cry of fury, Jeremy leaped onto the Queen's back, his fingers scrabbling for purchase on her slick carapace. The artifact in his hand pulsed with an urgent beat, guiding his movements. He raised the glowing sphere high, then plunged it down into the Queen's skull with all his strength. The reaction was instantaneous. A blinding explosion of energy erupted from the point of impact, engulfing the chamber in a searing white light. Jeremy felt himself thrown backward, his body rag-dolling through the air before slamming into the far wall. For a moment he knew only darkness. Then slowly the world began to filter back in. Jeremy blinked, his vision swimming as he struggled to his feet. The chamber was a scene of utter devastation. The Vex warriors lay strewn about like discarded toys, their bodies shattered and lifeless. In the center of the carnage lay the Queen herself, her once mighty form reduced to a smouldering husk. Jeremy looked down at his hand, where the artifact now sat fused to his flesh. It pulsed with a steady, rhythmic beat, as if in time with his own heart. He flexed his fingers experimentally, marveling at the strange sensation. "Jeremy," John's voice cut through the haze. "Thank God you're alive. We thought—" He trailed off, his eyes widening as he took in the scene of destruction. Steve appeared at his side, looking equally awestruck. Jeremy shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "It'll take more than a bug queen to put me down," he quipped. "Now let's get the hell out of here." As the escape pod drifted aimlessly through the void, Jeremy slumped against the bulkhead, his eyes fixed on the artifact fused to his hand. The steady pulse of energy seemed to mock him, a constant reminder of the horrors they had faced and the sacrifices they had made. John tended to Steve's wounds, his face grim. "He's not going to make it, Jeremy. Not without proper medical attention." Suddenly the pod shuddered violently, caught in the grip of an unseen force. Jeremy stumbled to the viewport, his eyes widening at the sight before him. A massive spacecraft loomed above them, its sleek black hull bristling with weapons. The ship dwarfed even the largest Illyrian warships, a behemoth of metal and power. "What the hell is that?" John breathed, his face pale. Jeremy didn't have time to answer before the pod was pulled into the ship's cavernous hangar bay, the sudden change in gravity sending them sprawling. As the pod settled onto the deck with a jarring thud, the hatch hissed open, revealing a contingent of heavily armed soldiers in black combat gear. The insignia of Blackstar, the shadowy organization that had hired them for the mission, was emblazoned on their chest plates. At the head of the group stood a tall, imposing figure in a black combat suit. His face was a mask of cold determination, his eyes glinting with a ruthless intelligence. "Colonel Cyrus Blackwood," he introduced himself, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Leader of Blackstar's Covert Operations Division, and you, I presume, are the ones who recovered the artifact." Jeremy stepped forward, his hand instinctively covering the pulsing sphere. "We did our job," he said warily. "Now we just want to get our friend some medical attention and go home." Blackwood's lips curled into a humorless smile. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Mr. Cooper. The artifact you hold is far too valuable to be left in the hands of mere mercenaries. I must insist that you hand it over, for the good of all humanity." Jeremy shook his head, his grip tightening on the artifact. "No way in hell," he snarled. "We've seen what this thing can do. It's too dangerous to fall into anyone's hands, especially yours." Blackwood sighed, as if dealing with a petulant child. "I had hoped we could resolve this amicably, but it seems you leave me no choice." He nodded to his men, who raised their weapons, the barrels trained on Jeremy and his team. "Take the artifact, by any means necessary." In that moment, all hell broke loose. Jeremy dove for cover, dragging Steve with him as John opened fire on the Blackstar soldiers. Bullets ricocheted off the hangar deck, sparks flying as the two sides exchanged a blistering hail of gunfire. Jeremy popped up from behind a crate, his rifle barking as he dropped two soldiers with well-placed shots. John, his face a mask of grim determination, laid down suppressing fire, buying them precious seconds. But it wasn't enough. The Black Star soldiers pressed forward, their superior numbers and firepower overwhelming the beleaguered mercenaries. A stray bullet caught Steve in the chest, sending him sprawling to the ground in a spray of blood. Jeremy scrambled to his friend's side, cradling his head in his lap. "Stay with me, Steve," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "We'll get you out of here, I promise." Steve coughed, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. "Don't worry about me, Jeremy," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "Just keep that damn thing safe, no matter what. Don't let them have it." With a final shuddering breath, Steve went limp in Jeremy's arms, his eyes staring sightlessly at the hangar ceiling. Jeremy bowed his head, hot tears stinging his eyes. He gently closed Steve's eyelids, his jaw clenched with a renewed sense of purpose. Rising to his feet, Jeremy spotted a sleek black shuttle parked nearby, its hatch invitingly open. "John!" he shouted over the chaos. "Cover me! We're getting the hell out of here!" John nodded grimly, laying down a blistering barrage of cover fire as Jeremy sprinted for the shuttle. The artifact clutched tightly to his chest. Bullets whizzed past his head, their deadly whispers spurring him on. With a final desperate leap, Jeremy hurled himself into the shuttle's cockpit, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The engines roared to life, the craft lifting off the deck with a shuddering whine. "Go!" John shouted, diving into the passenger compartment as a hail of bullets pinged off the shuttle's armored hull. "I'll hold them off." Jeremy punched the throttle, sending the shuttle rocketing out of the hangar bay and into the cold embrace of space. Behind them, Blackwood's voice crackled over the comlink, his tone laced with icy fury. "You can run, Mr. Cooper, but you can't hide," he snarled. "I will hunt you to the ends of the universe if I have to. That artifact belongs to Black Star, and we will have it, one way or another." Jeremy ignored the threat, his mind racing as he plotted their next move. He knew they couldn't run forever, but he also knew that the artifact was too dangerous to fall into Black Star's hands. There was only one place he could think of that might hold the answers he sought, the ruins of an ancient alien civilization hidden away on a distant, uncharted world. The shuttle raced through the inky blackness of space, its engines straining as John pushed them to their limits. In the passenger compartment, Jeremy sat hunched over the artifact, his brow furrowed in concentration. The sphere pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light, its surface covered in intricate alien glyphs that seemed to writhe and shift before his eyes. "What the hell is that thing, Jeremy?" John asked, glancing back over his shoulder. "And why is Black Star so desperate to get their hands on it?" Jeremy shook his head, his fingers tracing the contours of the artifact. "I don't know," he admitted, "but whatever it is, it's more than just some ancient relic. When I touched it back on the Illyrian ship, I felt something, a presence, like it was alive somehow." "Maybe," Jeremy mused. "All I know is that it's connected to the Vex somehow, and if Black Star gets their hands on it, who knows what they'll do with that kind of power." The shuttle shuddered suddenly, the deck plates vibrating beneath their feet. Jeremy lurched to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. What was that? On the view screen, a trio of sleek black fighters materialized out of the void, their weapons already blazing with deadly energy. The shuttle rocked violently as the first salvos struck its shields, alarms blaring in protest. Jeremy staggered into the cockpit, strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat. "Evasive maneuvers," he barked, his fingers flying over the controls. "We need to lose them before they blow us out of the sky." John wrenched the shuttle into a sharp dive, the G-forces slamming them back into their seats. The fighters pursued relentlessly, their laser cannons stitching the void with searing beams of light. Jeremy gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They couldn't outrun the fighters, and they couldn't outgun them either. But maybe, just maybe, they could outsmart them. "John, do you trust me?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the chaos. John shot him an incredulous look. Do I have a choice? Jeremy grinned, a wild light in his eyes. Then hang on tight. We're going to play a little game of chicken with our friends out there. With a deft flick of the controls, Jeremy sent the shuttle hurtling towards the nearest fighter, the distance between them vanishing in a heartbeat. The fighter's pilot, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, wrenched his craft aside at the last possible second, barely avoiding a collision. But Jeremy was already moving, the shuttle corkscrewing away in a dizzying spiral. The other two fighters, caught in the wash of their leader's engine exhaust, tumbled out of control, their formations scattering like leaves in a hurricane. "Now, John," Jeremy shouted, his finger hovering over the weapons controls, "hit them with everything we've got." The shuttle's laser cannons roared to life, spitting out a blistering barrage of crimson energy. The fighters, still struggling to regain control, were caught in the crossfire, their shields flaring and failing under the onslaught. One fighter exploded in a brilliant fireball, shrapnel pinging off the shuttle's hull. Another, its engines shredded by the barrage, spun away into the void, trailing smoke and debris. The third, its pilot frantically trying to evade, clipped an asteroid and tumbled end over end, its hull crumpling like tin foil. Jeremy let out a whoop of triumph, his face split in a fierce grin. "That's how we do it, baby." John slumped back in his seat, his hands shaking on the controls. "Jesus Christ, Jeremy," he breathed. "Let's not do that again any time soon, okay?" Jeremy just laughed, the adrenaline still surging through his veins, but his mirth faded as quickly as it had come, replaced by a grim sense of purpose. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. As the shuttle streaked onwards through the void, Jeremy knew that their journey was only just beginning. Somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the galaxy, lay the answers he sought, answers that could change the course of history itself. And he would find them no matter the cost. The shuttle touched down on the cracked, uneven surface of the dead planet, kicking up a cloud of ancient dust. Jeremy and John emerged from the craft, their weapons at the ready, their eyes scanning the crumbling ruins that stretched out before them. As they approached the edge of the once great city, Jeremy felt the artifact pulse with renewed energy, as if it were being drawn to the very heart of the ruins. The sensation was both exhilarating and unsettling, a reminder of the incredible power he now held in his hands. "Stay sharp," Jeremy muttered to John as they stepped into the eerie labyrinthine streets of the dead city. "We don't know what's waiting for us in there." The two men moved cautiously through the ruins, their footsteps echoing off the ancient walls. The city was a maze of twisting corridors and crumbling buildings, a testament to the long-vanished civilization that had once thrived here. As they delved deeper into the ruins, Jeremy and John began to notice strange murals and carvings adorning the walls. The images seemed to tell a story, a tale of an ancient war between two great powers. Jeremy studied the carving, his brow furrowed in concentration. According to the ancient texts, the progenitors had used the artifact to shape the very fabric of reality itself. They had been locked in an eternal war with the Vex, a race of insectoid creatures that sought to consume all life in the universe. If the progenitors created the artifact, Jeremy mused, then maybe it's the key to stopping the Vex once and for all. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed through the ruins. Jeremy and John spun around, their weapons raised, just as a swarm of Vex drones burst from the shadows. The creatures had been lying dormant for centuries, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The two men opened fire, their bullets tearing through the drones' chitinous exoskeletons. But for every drone they felled, two more seemed to take its place. Jeremy and John fought bravely, their backs pressed against each other as they tried to hold off the relentless onslaught. "Jeremy, look out!" John shouted, shoving Jeremy aside just as a drone lunged for his throat. The creature latched onto John instead, its razor-sharp claws digging into his flesh. John screamed in agony as the drone dragged him away into the darkness, his cries fading into the distance. Jeremy, now alone and desperate, felt the artifact pulse with renewed urgency. It seemed to be guiding him, pulling him towards the center of the city. With a determined grunt, Jeremy set off into the ruins, following the pulsing energy of the artifact. As he neared the heart of the city, Jeremy found himself standing before a massive, pulsating machine. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a twisted mass of metal and organic tissue that seemed to be the source of the artifact's power. As Jeremy approached the machine, a ghostly apparition suddenly materialized before him. It was a progenitor, long dead, but somehow still bound to the artifact. The creature spoke directly into Jeremy's mind, its voice a whisper that seemed to come from the depths of the universe itself. "The artifact is not just a weapon," the progenitor said, its words echoing through Jeremy's consciousness. "It is a key to unlocking the secrets of the universe itself. With it, you can reshape reality, create a universe where your kind reigns supreme." Jeremy's mind reeled with the implications of the progenitor's words. He had a choice to make, a decision that would determine the fate of the galaxy itself. He could use the artifact to destroy the Vex once and for all, or he could harness its power to create a new reality, one where humanity was the undisputed master of the cosmos. As the apparition faded away, Jeremy was left alone with the weight of this decision, the fate of the galaxy resting in his hands. He looked down at the artifact, its surface pulsing with an otherworldly energy, and knew that the time had come to choose his path. Jeremy's fingers hovered over the pulsating machine, the artifact in his hand glowing with an otherworldly light. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force, his mind torn between the seductive promise of ultimate power and the crushing responsibility of wielding such a force. In that moment, the faces of his fallen comrades flashed before his eyes. David, Mike, Steve, and now John, their lives sacrificed in the pursuit of this cursed object. Their deaths, he realized, could not be in vain. He had to end this, once and for all. With a final, resolute breath, Jeremy placed his hand on the machine's surface. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. The artifact flared with a blinding, searing light, its energy surging through Jeremy's body like a bolt of lightning. He screamed in agony as the power coursed through his veins, his flesh feeling as though it were being torn apart at the molecular level. The machine rumbled to life, shaking the very foundations of the ancient city. A wave of energy burst forth from its core, spreading out across the planet's surface like a tsunami of raw, unstoppable force. Jeremy watched through pain-blurred eyes as the wave expanded into the sky, racing out into the stars beyond. On distant worlds, Vex hives began to crumble and collapse, their chitinous forms dissolving into dust as the artifact's power washed over them. Drones fell from the air, their mechanical limbs twitching and spasming before falling still. The Queens, those towering monstrosities that had haunted Jeremy's nightmares, let out final, piercing screams as they too were consumed by the relentless energy. Through the haze of pain, Jeremy felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. He had done it. The Vex were no more, their threat to the galaxy forever erased. But as the initial surge of triumph faded, a new, more terrifying realization began to dawn. The artifact's power, now unleashed, was not content with merely destroying the Vex. It hungered for more, its insatiable appetite growing with each passing second. Jeremy watched in horror as the very fabric of reality began to unravel before his eyes. Worlds once vibrant and teeming with life began to collapse in on themselves, their surfaces cracking and buckling as the artifact's energy tore them apart. Stars, those eternal beacons of light in the vast emptiness of space, winked out of existence one by one, their light extinguished like candles in a raging storm. Entire civilizations, species that had endured for millennia, were erased from history in the blink of an eye. Their cities, their art, their very existence, all reduced to dust and echoes in the relentless march of the artifact's power. Jeremy, his body broken, and his mind shattered by the immensity of what he had unleashed, stumbled out of the ruins, each step a Herculean effort. The once great city, now little more than a crumbling testament to the folly of his actions, seemed to mock him with its silent, empty streets. He dragged himself back to the shuttle, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what he had done. As he approached the craft, a final, devastating blow awaited him. John, his last remaining friend and companion, lay slumped against the shuttle's hull, his body still and lifeless. With a wordless cry of anguish, Jeremy gathered John into his arms, his tears falling onto the fallen soldier's face. He was alone now, the last surviving member of a team that had set out to save the galaxy, only to become the instrument of its destruction. With numb, leaden movements, Jeremy carried John's body into the shuttle, laying him gently on one of the bunks. He slid into the pilot's seat, his hands moving over the controls with a strange, detached precision. There was only one place left to go, one final destination for a man who had lost everything. The icy, desolate world where he had first laid hands on the artifact, the place where this nightmare had begun. As the shuttle lifted off from the planet's surface, Jeremy watched through the view screen as the stars continued to fade and die, the once vibrant tapestry of the universe slowly unraveling before his eyes. The weight of his actions settled over him like a suffocating shroud, the realization of what he had become tearing at his soul. He was a monster, a destroyer of worlds, a bringer of chaos and ruin. The power he had sought to control had consumed him, turning him into the very thing he had fought so hard to destroy. In his final moments, as the shuttle drifted through the silent, lifeless void, Jeremy looked down at the artifact, now cold and inert in his hand. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped his lips, echoing through the empty corridors of the ship. The universe, once a vast and wondrous expanse full of life and possibility, was no more. And it was all because of him, a lone human who had dared to reach for the stars, only to bring them crashing down around him. The shuttle pressed on through the gathering darkness, a solitary speck of light in the endless night of space. Within its metal walls, Jeremy Cooper, the man who had destroyed the galaxy, sat alone with his regrets, his laughter fading into the void as the last stars winked out, one by one, until only the darkness remained. As Jeremy's shuttle drifted through the void, the last remnant of a universe consumed by the artifact's power, a sudden burst of light filled the cockpit. A rift in the fabric of space-time tore open before him, and from its swirling depths emerged a vessel of impossible proportions. The ship, a glistening construct of otherworldly crystal, dwarfed Jeremy's tiny shuttle. A beam of pure, radiant energy engulfed his craft, pulling it inexorably towards the strange vessel. Jeremy, his body racked with pain from the artifact's destructive energy, could only watch in awe as he was drawn into the heart of the ship. As he crossed the threshold, he found himself standing in a vast chamber, its walls pulsing with an inner light. Before him, a being of pure energy coalesced, its form shifting and shimmering like a living constellation. Jeremy's mind reeled as the being's thoughts brushed against his own, a presence both ancient and powerful. "I am the last of the progenitors." The being spoke directly into Jeremy's mind, its voice a symphony of stars. "And you, Jeremy Cooper, have been chosen." Jeremy, his voice hoarse from disuse, could only manage a whisper. Chosen for what? The progenitor's form pulsed with a gentle, pulsating light. "The artifact you wield is not merely a weapon, but a test, a means to find a worthy successor to our cosmic power." Jeremy looked down at the artifact, now fused to his hand, its surface glowing with an inner fire. "But why me?" "Your actions, your willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good, have proven you worthy," the progenitor replied, its voice filled with a deep, abiding wisdom. "You alone have the strength to bear this burden." As the progenitor spoke, Jeremy felt a surge of energy course through his body, the artifact's power merging with his very being. His mortal flesh fell away, replaced by a form of pure, incandescent light. "With this power you can reshape the universe itself," the progenitor said, its form beginning to fade, "create new worlds, new stars, and new life. But know that this power comes with a price. You must leave behind all that you have known, the progenitor replied, its voice growing distant. Your friends, your family, your very humanity. You must become the eternal guardian of the cosmos, forever watching over the life you will create. As the progenitor's vessel began to dissolve around him, Jeremy felt a profound sense of loss, mingled with an even greater sense of purpose. He was no longer Jeremy Cooper, the soldier, the mercenary. He was something more, something greater. With a final burst of light, the progenitor's ship vanished, leaving Jeremy alone in the void, the last remnant of a universe that had been. But he knew that he carried with him the hopes and dreams of all those who had come before, the last, best legacy of a cosmos that would never be forgotten. Jeremy turned his gaze to the vast expanse of the universe, the artifact's power now a part of him, glowing with the promise of creation itself. With a thought, he set out into the infinite reaches of space, ready to begin his new existence as the guardian of all that would come to be. As Jeremy embarked on his new existence as the cosmic guardian, he marveled at the power at his fingertips. With a mere thought, he could conjure entire galaxies into being, each one teeming with life and potential. He sculpted planets and stars, set them spinning in intricate dances, and watched as civilizations blossomed in their light. But as the eons passed, Jeremy began to notice a troubling pattern. No matter how carefully he crafted each world, no matter how much he poured his heart and soul into their creation, they all seemed to follow the same inevitable path. The civilizations would rise, flourish for a time, and then fall, consumed by the very same forces that had once driven them to greatness. He watched as wars raged across the surface of countless planets, as disease and famine swept through populations, leaving devastation in their wake. He saw the strong prey upon the weak, the rich exploit the poor, and the powerful crush the helpless underfoot. At first, Jeremy tried to intervene, to use his powers to steer these civilizations towards a better path. He appeared to them as a god, a benevolent force that could guide them towards peace and prosperity. But no matter what he did, no matter how much he tried to help, the pattern always repeated itself. The weight of his responsibility began to bear down upon him, crushing him under its immense weight. He had thought that his powers would be a blessing, a way to create a better universe for all. But now, as he watched the suffering and pain that seemed to be an inescapable part of existence, he began to wonder if he had been cursed instead. In a moment of despair, Jeremy made a fateful decision. He would create a perfect world, a utopia free from all the ills that plagued the rest of the universe. He poured all of his power, all of his knowledge, into this new creation, crafting it with painstaking care and attention to detail. And at first it seemed to work. The inhabitants of this new world lived in harmony, free from conflict and suffering. They had everything they could ever need or want, and they seemed to be truly happy. But as Jeremy watched over his creation, he began to notice something strange. The people of this perfect world seemed to be losing something essential, something that he had never even considered before. Without the challenges and struggles that defined mortal existence, they began to stagnate and decay. Their art, once vibrant and alive, became dull and lifeless. Their science, once a driving force of progress, ground to a halt. And their very souls seemed to wither away, leaving them as little more than empty shells, going through the motions of life without any real purpose or meaning. In that moment, Jeremy realized the terrible mistake he had made. He had thought that he could create a perfect world, a universe without suffering or pain. But in doing so, he had stripped away the very things that made life worth living. With a heavy heart, Jeremy unmade his creation, scattering its inhabitants back out into the universe to fend for themselves. He knew that he could not be the master of all existence, could not shape the universe according to his own desires. Instead, he retreated into the background, watching over the countless worlds and civilizations he had created, but never again interfering in their affairs. He became a silent guardian, a watchful presence in the cosmos, forever bound by the power of the artifact and the weight of his own choices. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.